Greetings, YouTube. Today I'm going to review Dispatches from the Edge, a memoir of war, disaster, and survival by Anderson Cooper. I mentioned that I was reading this book to my therapist. It was pertinent to our session. And he commented, he said, yeah, he came out of the closet recently, which is actually the reason I got around to reading this. It's been sitting on my shelf for over a year, I think. I finally decided I should read it. And I said, yeah, I'd heard that. And my therapist goes, I just can't figure out who he came out of the closet to. Himself? Because, frankly, everyone else already knew. This book starts at birth. This is the memoir of Anderson Cooper's life all the way up through his coverage of Hurricane Katrina. Now, I didn't know a lot about Anderson Cooper. I know he had his own television show. I know that he was a journalist and that he was known for being the type of person that really was out there on the edge, on the point. They didn't mind getting themselves out there at the sharp end. And that was interesting to me. I've seen some of his reports. I think I might have actually seen his Katrina coverage. And was impressed with what he does. But I didn't know, for example, is that he is the son of Gloria Vanderbilt, a woman born to fabulous wealth who became even more fabulously wealthy, and that Anderson Cooper literally had the silver spoon thrust into his mouth at birth and didn't ever have to become anything. He could have become Paris Hilton, but he didn't. When he was 10, his father died unexpectedly of heart problems. Apparently heart problems ran in his family. I'm hoping they don't run in Anderson Cooper's family, genes, because he's quite a treasure. But it had a major impact on Anderson Cooper. And much like Bruce Wayne, for some inexplicable reason, this wealthy, privileged kid didn't get the therapy they so desperately needed. And that kind of set Anderson Cooper on his course. It made him begin to really question the security of the world around him. And he began to pursue things with a dogged nature that other people of his contemporaries, of his age and his social status, never did. When he was 21, his older brother, he was 23, committed suicide. He literally leaped from the balcony of Anderson Cooper's bedroom in their high-rise apartment. And again, more major issues were added to Anderson Cooper. And when he went out there in the world as a journalist, he very much did so as an adrenaline junkie with a bit of a death wish. He faked a press pass and then flew to Somalia and literally dropped himself into a war zone to see if he could drum up some stories that might get picked up by some channel back in the United States. Alone, with no support. That's ballsy, but not smart. It shows a person that has risk assessment problems. Fortunately, he wasn't murdered and his possessions stolen. And he went on to go from one hotspot to the next hotspot to the next hotspot, amassing a wealth of legitimately filed stories, but also personal anecdotes. And this entire book is based on real people. Either direct quotes or the best he could do at the end of the day where he couldn't record things. He'd go back and he'd write down what people said. So none of these are amalgamations of people. None of these are composite individuals he's talking to in the book. He's talking to real people. And he was in war zones where he was under fire. And he talks about one point where he's actually trying to set up a shot and snipers start shooting at him. And he gets footage of himself under fire. And it's, it's important and it's well done and it's riveting. And later, when he's watching it, he notices that he's smiling. That should have been a hint. Go see a therapist. But his entire life was just one series of trying to cope with the two major deaths in his life that he didn't cope with. until he finally encountered the one story that he couldn't outrun: Hurricane Katrina. And it was such a monumental disaster in so many ways, and such a game changer for our country and for Anderson Cooper, that he was finally forced to confront these relationships, this grieving process that he had never finished. I highly recommend this book. His writing style makes me feel lucky and fortunate that maybe my writing style will someday be in vogue, because he writes like I do a lot of time, these little tiny short choppy sentences, which kind of made me smile. But there's a point in the Katrina coverage where he speaks to a cop, and he asks the cop if he thinks that the abandonment of New Orleans by everyone on a local, state, and national level could have had anything to do with race. And the guy says yes. He says, if the governor's family had been at risk from Hurricane Katrina, do you think this would have been the response we had? Except if Hurricane Katrina had struck Connecticut, do you think they would have just walked away from Harvard and let it drown? No, they wouldn't. And the cop's right. America just wrote off a city full of black people. And this story brought that into focus for me in a way that nothing else ever has. Because I wasn't just watching a report, someone filing a story. I was inside the head of Anderson Cooper and how he had to deal with going from point to point to get from story point to story point in the city of New Orleans, and passing bloated bodies being eaten by rats in the street in America. This is a powerful book. It's an important book. It's very well written. It's a fast read. I was really surprised how quickly I read this. Again, maybe it's because his sentences are short. But from a kid that grew up in a household where household parties, family parties involved Andy Warhol and Truman Capote, to a guy hip deep in the decaying refuse of a city, filing some of the most moving reports ever done on that disaster. It's one heck of a journey.